The fluorescent lights of the chamber hum like distant thunder, casting their cold glare over rows of restless faces. Papers shuffle. A cough breaks the silence. Then, Pam Bondi leans forward, that trademark smirk curling like smoke. Her voice slices through the air, honeyed with sarcasm and sharp as a blade. Remind us again, Congresswoman, where exactly did you get your law degree? A murmur ripples through the room, half gasp, half stifled laugh. Bondi's tone isn't curious, it's surgical. A question crafted not to learn, but to belittle. She leans back, satisfied, tapping her pen like a drumbeat of arrogance. Cameras zoom in, catching the glint of triumph in her eyes. To her, this is the moment she draws blood. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. Her gaze lifts slowly, deliberate, steady as sunrise. No panic, no twitch, just that quiet steel that unnerves the loud and flatters the brave. For a heartbeat, the room seems to stop breathing. The narrator's voice enters, low and deliberate. They thought this was just another hearing, another round of grandstanding, another attempt to make headlines at someone else's expense. But what they didn't know was that history doesn't always announce itself with a gavel. Sometimes it begins with a smirk. Bondi tilts her head, waiting for the sting, for the stumble, for the woman across from her to crumble under the weight of pedigree politics. But Crockett's silence is louder than any retort. Her stillness begins to draw attention. Members shift. The audience leans in. Somewhere, a camera light flickers red. The narrator continues, voice tightening with gravity. In that instant, two Americas faced each other across a polished table, one built on entitlement, the other on endurance. One flaunting power, the other embodying it. A long pause. Crockett's eyes lock with Bondi's, unblinking. The tension stretches until it hums in the bones. And in that silence, the narrator whispers. You could almost feel the turn of the tide. Bondi's smirk falters, just slightly. A flicker of doubt flashes across her face, gone as quickly as it came. They thought it would be another performance, but what Jasmine Crockett said next didn't just silence Pam Bondi, it shook the chamber itself.
Rewind a few hours earlier. The hearing had started with the dull rhythm of bureaucracy, printed reports, raised eyebrows, the practiced drone of legal language. The topic on paper was simple: questions of accountability, an inquiry into misused public funds. It was supposed to be just another hearing. But Pam Bondi had other plans. From the moment she took her seat, her tone carried that familiar air of superiority, part lawyer, part performer. Every question was laced with a subtle sneer, every interruption timed for maximum disruption. She wasn't here for clarity, she was here for spectacle. And her target was clear. The narrator's voice lowers. To her, Crockett wasn't a colleague, she was a target. Bondi had made a name for herself by playing offense, by finding the line between criticism and cruelty and sprinting across it. She interrupted female colleagues mid-sentence, smiled through rebuttals, and used charm like a weapon. But there was something sharper in her demeanor when she faced women who didn't fit her mold, women who carried a different kind of strength, one born of struggle instead of privilege. The scene widens, Crockett flipping through her notes, calm, professional, while Bondi's smirk grows. The difference between them becomes its own kind of dialogue. One built empires through access, the other through resistance. The narrator continues, To Bondi, this wasn't debate. It was domination. She'd seen women like Jasmine Crockett rise before, and she'd learned one thing: if you can't outshine 'em, undermine 'em. Bondi's voice rises, polite but cutting. She repeats Crockett's words back to her with exaggerated pauses, the kind meant to draw laughter from her allies. It doesn't come. A few heads turn, one aide glances uncomfortably at another. The tone in the room begins to shift, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Outside the chamber, in the digital corridors of Twitter and TikTok, the tension is already leaking. Short clips begin surfacing, Bondi's smirk here, Crockett's stillness there. Someone captions it, "This gonna be good." Another writes, "Watch how Crockett handles this." Before the hearing is even over, a moment has begun to ferment into something larger, the spark before the explosion. The narrator's voice grows heavier, but behind that anticipation was something deeper, a collective memory. Because this wasn't the first time someone tried to question Jasmine Crockett's worth. The screen slows on Bondi's smirk, the camera freezing just long enough for the arrogance to register. "And it wouldn't be the last time," the narrator says, voice cutting through the stillness, "that they regretted it."
Pam Bondi's career had been built like a stage set, glossy, rehearsed, designed to impress from a distance. Cameras loved her. Her delivery was crisp, her confidence unwavering, her smile calculated to project both warmth and authority. But behind that practiced composure was something else. The hunger of someone who once stood at the center of power and couldn't bear to watch the spotlight move on. The narrator begins slowly, voice edged with irony. Pam Bondi had mastered the art of survival in politics, not through integrity but through reinvention. Once the darling of conservative media, she had parlayed her reputation as a tough attorney general into national fame. She'd stood beside the powerful, defended the indefensible, and learned early that outrage could be monetized as easily as law could be weaponized. The years had changed the headlines, but not the instinct. Wherever power pooled, Bondi was nearby, smiling for the cameras, ready to defend it. Jasmine Crockett's story didn't begin in the marble halls of Congress. It began under the flicker of fluorescent bulbs in a cramped law office in Texas, the kind where the walls carried the echoes of struggle and survival. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, burnt coffee, and purpose. She was fresh out of law school then, sleeves rolled up, heart on fire, defending people who couldn't afford to be heard. The narrator's voice enters, warm and reverent. She didn't inherit her power. She earned every inch of it. While others built networks through privilege, Crockett built hers through persistence, case by case, client by client, injustice by injustice. Her first major case wasn't glamorous. A single mother wrongfully evicted after a landlord cut corners. A young man brutalized by police for existing in the wrong skin at the wrong time. Each story carved something into her, not bitterness, but resolve. The courtroom was never neutral ground. The judges looked past her. Opposing counsel underestimated her. And yet, every time she spoke, her voice carried weight. It wasn't just the law she wielded. It was the moral authority of lived experience. She knew what it meant to be dismissed, and she turned that dismissal into discipline. The narrator continues. She learned that justice wasn't about who spoke loudest, but who refused to stop speaking. Her degree hung on the wall behind her desk, framed but fading at the edges from the Texas sun. To her, it wasn't decoration, it was defiance, proof that she'd walked through doors not meant to open, that she'd earned her way into spaces designed to shut her out. She'd seen people with legacy names and trust fund mentors glance at her diploma and smirk. She never forgot those looks. Her mother's voice had been her compass. "Baby, don't let them talk you out of what you already earned." Those words followed her through every courtroom, every campaign, every moment someone tried to make her question her place. Years later, when she ran for office, the same doubters resurfaced. Too young, too bold, too confrontational. She didn't shrink, she ran harder. She knocked on doors in the heat until her palms blistered, her shoes wore thin, and her name began to mean something beyond headlines. It became a symbol for anyone who'd ever been told, "Not yet," or "Not you." The narrator's tone sharpens, pride swelling in each word. Where others inherited their platforms, she built hers from the ground up, brick by brick, vote by vote, truth by truth. Her colleagues in Congress often underestimated her at first, until she spoke. Crockett didn't posture or play politics. She dissected arguments like evidence in a courtroom, methodical and fearless. And when she stood, the room stilled. There was no grand theatrics, no self-promotion, just clarity. Footage flashes in memory. Crockett grilling witnesses, her tone unwavering, defending reproductive rights with the precision of both lawyer and woman who understood what was at stake, calling out corruption with the calm of someone who'd seen real injustice, not just read about it. The narrator adds, "In a world obsessed with credentials, she reminded them that degrees don't make you dangerous, conviction does." Her law degree, the same one Bondi would later mock, had always been more than paper. It was her passport out of invisibility. It carried the fingerprints of sacrifice, late nights, side jobs, meals skipped to pay tuition. It represented not just her intellect, but her lineage. The dreams her mother whispered while ironing uniforms, the prayers her grandmother murmured in a language of faith older than the Constitution itself. To them, it was paper. To her, it was proof. That proof became her armor in rooms where she wasn't expected to belong. The same composure that irritated her critics was the product of years spent being underestimated. She'd faced worse than smug questions in committee hearings. She'd faced eviction notices, overdue bills, and the weight of expectation from communities that rarely saw themselves reflected in power. The narrator slows, voice thick with emotion. She never confused calm for compliance. She understood that the loudest roar sometimes comes from the quietest stance. And so when Pam Bondi's smirk cut across that hearing room, that look of practiced superiority honed over decades of privilege, Crockett didn't just see a rival. She saw the pattern, the repetition of history's old song, one voice trying to shrink another. But she also saw the opportunity to rewrite that rhythm, to flip the script in real time, live and on camera. The camera in the chamber caught her face, serene, almost serene enough to be mistaken for surrender. But those who'd followed her journey knew better. That look wasn't submission, it was calculation. It was the same expression she wore before dismantling an opponent's case, the stillness before the strike. The narrator's voice deepens, the tempo slowing to a beat of reverence. Every insult ever whispered behind closed doors, every doubt disguised as advice, every headline written to minimize her, they all converged in that moment. The weight of it hung in the air, heavy and electric. Crockett's story wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about reclamation. Her very presence in that chair was proof of resilience, of how far someone could rise when told to sit down. The narrator pauses, then delivers the line like a verdict. So when Pam Bondi mocked her law degree, she didn't realize she was mocking every woman who'd ever fought twice as hard to be seen once.
The chamber air was razor sharp, the kind of silence that hums just before it breaks. Pam Bondi leaned back in her chair, chin tilted, the faintest smile curling her lips like she'd already won. "I just find it ironic," she began, her voice sugar-coated with disdain, "that someone with such a questionable legal background is lecturing us about the law." It hit the room like a slap. Gasps, low murmurs, that stunned, collective intake of air when something crosses from disrespect into audacity. A few heads turned instinctively toward Jasmine Crockett, waiting for the reaction. The camera tightened on her face. Still, unmoving, the weight of restraint pressed against the frame. The narrator's voice dropped to a whisper. "The silence before the storm." Bondi wasn't done. "I mean," she continued, almost laughing now, "I can't even recall where she studied. Was it even accredited?" She smirked to the right, toward her allies, expecting approval, that smug kind of laughter that bubbles when privilege confuses cruelty for cleverness. But no one laughed. Even those who shared her bench looked uneasy. The arrogance was too raw, too performative. Cameras flashed, the public gallery whispered. The networks caught the tension, the rhythm of power shifting without a single word spoken yet. Crockett's fingers rested on the desk, perfectly still. Her nails caught a glint of light. The faint hum of air conditioning filled the pause, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Her eyes lifted, slowly, to meet Bondi's. There was no fury, no flinch, just calculation. The narrator spoke again, tone low, cinematic. She had learned long ago that silence can be the sharpest blade in the room. Bondi mistook that calm for weakness. "Well," she pressed, "surely someone so proud of their degree can remind us where it came from." The condescension dripped with intent, not curiosity, but humiliation disguised as inquiry. A cutaway. The audience in the gallery, phones poised, a reporter typing furiously, another whispering, "Is she really going there?" The sound of a pen tapping, a gavel twitching in an impatient hand, the hum of politics teetering on the edge of spectacle. Still, Crockett didn't move. Her breath was even. Her gaze didn't waver. The narrator's tone deepened. Every second of silence was a mirror. Every beat a reflection of Bondi's arrogance. Bondi began to fidget, sensing the shift she couldn't name. "Well," she said again, softer now, "we're all waiting." The mockery had lost its rhythm. Then, a sound, barely perceptible at first. The creak of Crockett's chair as she leaned forward, her hands clasped together, her eyes didn't blink. The movement was deliberate, surgical, the kind that signals to every person in the room something's about to happen. The narrator. She had been underestimated so often that even her pauses became strategy. Crockett's voice entered, calm as still water. "Madam Chair," she began, her tone carrying a precision that sliced through the chatter. "I've tolerated interruptions. I've tolerated disrespect. But what I will not tolerate is revisionist arrogance." The room froze. Bondi blinked, lips parting slightly. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every word hit with the quiet authority of truth that doesn't seek permission. The narrator whispered, "The storm had found its voice." Around them, even the cameras seemed to still. The faint buzz of tension turned into a pulse, steady, rhythmic, electric. The gallery leaned forward. Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "Here it comes." Crockett's hands tightened together, but her face stayed composed, almost gentle. "You want to question my background? Then you better be ready to have yours held to the same light." Gasps again, sharper this time, collective, involuntary, the kind that comes when the crowd knows they're witnessing history in real time. The narrator's voice matched the rising hum of strings. Every trial she'd fought, every insult she'd endured, every door she'd kicked open, it all led here, to this moment. Bondi opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her expression faltered, pride fighting panic in real time. And still, Crockett leaned in, just slightly,
enough for the microphones to catch the gravity in her voice. Her eyes locked on Bondi's. Her next line wasn't shouted. It was delivered like a verdict. The narrator's tone slowed, deliberate, suspenseful. And then Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, and the room forgot to breathe.
The air was molten now, thick with the static of humiliation turning into justice. Cameras zoomed closer. Every breath felt amplified, every heartbeat audible. Jasmine Crockett sat there, still as stone, until the silence grew unbearable. Then, in a tone that started soft, almost tender, she spoke. "Miss Bondi," she began, her voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. "I didn't inherit my degree through favors or backdoor deals. I earned mine, in a courtroom, not a cocktail party." A soundless gasp rippled through the room. You could almost hear the collective inhale of satisfaction. Someone in the gallery bit back a grin. A staffer lowered their eyes, fighting not to smirk. Crockett didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. Her calm was authority, the kind that doesn't ask for recognition because it already commands it. "I didn't buy my way into power. I built my way into purpose. And that purpose isn't to please people who measure worth by the rooms they drink in, but by the lives they never see." The narrator entered softly, voice thick with gravity. It wasn't just a response. It was a reckoning. Every syllable was a mirror held to the face of entitlement, polished, poised, and suddenly terrified. Bondi blinked. Her smirk trembled, the muscles in her jaw tightening in visible discomfort. For the first time, she looked human, fallible. Her pen stopped tapping. Her eyes darted briefly toward the audience, searching for an ally that no longer existed. Crockett leaned forward slightly. "You can mock my degree all you want," she said, "but it's the same one I've used to defend people your policies forgot. The same one that helped families keep their homes. The same one that stood between your donor's greed and someone's only paycheck." The crowd shifted, almost reverent now. A low murmur of agreement swelled, restrained only by the decorum of the chamber. See, the thing about paper is that it doesn't define power. Character does. And that's something no diploma, no donor, no title can give you. Her tone sharpened, measured, and precise. Some of us didn't come here to perform. We came here to represent. And that scares people who've mistaken performance for power. Bondi looked down at her notes, then back up, trying to reassemble the armor that had shattered under the weight of truth. But the damage was done. Every camera, every phone, every microphone, all of them were now trained on the woman who had just rewritten the balance of the room. The narrator's voice rose with slow, cinematic tension. Every word was a reclamation, every pause a declaration. It wasn't a defense, it was a demolition of the very stage her critic had built. Crockett pressed on, her tone softening into something almost elegiac. "You see, where I come from, we don't have the luxury of being underestimated for sport. We're underestimated for survival. And we learn early, if we're going to be in the room, we'd better be ready to own it." Her words landed like a slow drumbeat, steady, rhythmic, inescapable. "So if my law degree makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's not because of where I got it, but because of what I've done with it." Bondi froze. The air left her lungs in a silent sigh. For a heartbeat, it looked like she might respond, but then thought better of it. The smirk was gone. In its place, the haunted stillness of realization. The narrator's tone deepened. It wasn't just silence that followed. It was the sound of authority being reclaimed, not by status, but by truth.
Crockett continued, her eyes never wavering. For years I've been told to stay in my lane. But here's the thing, I built this lane, brick by brick, case by case. And while some people were trading influence in back rooms, I was standing in front of judges, fighting for people who couldn't afford a lobbyist. A low murmur of assent rippled through the audience. Quiet nods, folded arms loosening. Even a few behind Bondi seemed to shift in discomfort. Crockett smiled faintly, the kind of smile that knows its power. So no, Miss Bondi, I won't apologize for being here. I won't shrink because my path didn't look like yours. Because if I've learned one thing in the law, it's that justice doesn't come from pedigree. It comes from persistence. And persistence is something women like me have mastered because we've had to. The narrator spoke again, voice now carrying warmth beneath the thunder. Every woman watching, every person who's been dismissed, every voice told they didn't belong. In that moment, they saw themselves. They saw that strength doesn't shout, it stands. Crockett leaned back slightly, gaze unwavering. So you can question my degree, she said, but what you can't question, what you can never take, is what I've done with it. The chamber was dead silent now. Even the cameras seemed hesitant to breathe. The rhythm of her words hung in the air like smoke, sharp, undeniable, eternal. And then the final cut. Crockett's tone softened, but her words carried the weight of every fight, every late night, every insult turned into ammunition. Because where I'm from, she said, we don't wait for permission to matter. She paused, looked directly at Bondi. We earn it. Silence. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just the echo of truth vibrating through marble walls. The narrator's final words of the section flowed like a cinematic pulse. By the time she finished, Pam Bondi wasn't smirking anymore.
The moment Crockett leaned back, her words still echoing, the hearing room erupted like a struck match. The applause started small, a few claps, hesitant, almost rebellious in their defiance of decorum. But then it spread. A thunderous ripple of approval rolled through the chamber, rising over the gavel's frantic taps for order. Cameras flashed like lightning. Someone whispered, "She ended her." And the phrase caught on before the microphones even cut out. The narrator's voice returned, steady, cinematic. What began as a condescending question became a cultural quake. In less than 24 hours, one exchange became a rallying cry. By nightfall, the clip had already been viewed 2 million times. By morning, it was everywhere. Hashtag Crockett Clapback trended #1 on Twitter. TikTok edits looped her line, "I earned mine in a courtroom, not a cocktail party," under slow-motion filters and triumphant music. YouTube compilations titled "Pam Bondi's Face the Moment She Knew" racked up hundreds of thousands of views in hours. Screens glowed across the country, from college dorms to barbershops, from bustling subways to quiet kitchens. And each replay carried the same electric satisfaction, watching arrogance crumble in real time. Tweets rolled in like applause. That's how you handle arrogance, with receipts and restraint. Crockett didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard. This is why representation matters. She didn't just defend herself, she defended all of us. The narrator wove through the digital chorus. For millions watching, it wasn't just politics, it was personal. Every woman who had been talked over, every worker dismissed for not looking the part, every student told they didn't belong, they all saw themselves in that calm, cutting composure. On Instagram, activists reposted clips with captions like, "Dignity is the loudest mic drop." Comment sections turned into mini town halls, threads of people sharing stories about professors who doubted them, bosses who belittled them, strangers who mistook kindness for weakness. The clip became more than content. It became catharsis.
Late-night hosts weighed in too. One joked, "Pam Bondi's search history right now is 'Can I return a smirk?'" Another played the clip on loop saying, This is how you turn shade into sunlight." Bondi, for her part, went silent. Her social media accounts, usually bustling with self-congratulation, were quiet. No statements, no spin. Only the digital ghosts of her expression, replayed millions of times, dissected frame by frame. Every freeze frame told the same story. A woman caught off guard by the mirror of her own arrogance. The narrator's tone softened, tinged with reverence. Some called it the moment the chamber found its conscience again. Others called it overdue justice. But for those who'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to speak truth without fury, it was liberation. News segments ran the clip beneath headlines like "Grace Under Fire" and "The Law Degree Heard Around the World." Editorials compared Crockett's composure to historical moments of resistance, quiet, measured, unforgettable. And through it all, Crockett herself said nothing more. No follow-up posts, no interviews. Just silence, the same kind of silence that had unnerved Bondi hours before. The narrator continued, voice gaining quiet intensity. Because when your truth lands that hard, you don't need to repeat it. The world does that for you. Days later, the ripple effect kept growing. Young law students shared her speech at graduations. Community centers replayed the clip at empowerment panels. A mural appeared overnight in Dallas, Crockett's silhouette under bold letters, "Earned, not given." The country had found its new mantra. One user wrote, "I showed my daughter this clip. She asked if she could be like her one day. I told her, you already are." Another posted, "She didn't just win the argument, she restored the meaning of professionalism, strength without venom." The narrator's voice carried warmth now, swelling with the collective pride pulsing through screens and hearts alike. It wasn't the volume of her voice that made it viral. It was the weight of her restraint, the eloquence of someone who'd carried disrespect her entire life and turned it into power. As the days passed, Bondi reappeared briefly. Tight smile, carefully chosen words, a statement about misunderstood intent. But the moment had already outgrown her. The narrative belonged elsewhere now, to every person who'd watched that clip and whispered, "That's how it's done." The hashtag evolved too, from hashtag Crockett Clapback to hashtag Earns Not Given. It wasn't just a trend, it was a reminder. The narrator concluded softly. By the time the headlines moved on, the impact hadn't faded, it had multiplied. Because beyond the likes and retweets, something deeper had shifted. And then, a pause, lingering, full of promise.
The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, not in the noise, but in the quiet after. The chamber that once buzzed with tension now carried a different hum, respect. Even those who had doubted her found themselves strangely still, caught between admiration and reflection. Later, in a brief statement outside the building, Jasmine Crockett spoke again, not for applause, but for clarity. Her tone was calm, her words simple. "Mockery," she said, "only stings when you doubt yourself. I don't." The line hung in the air like scripture, effortless, complete. The narrator entered softly like the voice of a conscience rediscovered. In a world that measures worth by pedigree, Jasmine Crockett reminded us that integrity is the real degree. That paper can certify knowledge, but only grace proves wisdom. Footage replayed in the public imagination, Bondi's smirk fading, Crockett's calm composure, the collective exhale of a nation that had grown tired of arrogance masquerading as expertise. The contrast was clear now: arrogance versus grace, privilege versus perseverance, status versus soul. The narrator continued, voice rich with moral weight.
We live in a time when loudness is mistaken for strength, and mockery passes for argument. But Crockett showed us something quieter and infinitely stronger, the power of knowing who you are, even when others try to tell you what you're not. Clips flashed through the montage, Crockett helping families in her district, speaking at a town hall, hugging a child outside a courthouse. No theatrics, no spotlight, just service, just purpose. She didn't win because she shouted louder. She won because she stood taller, rooted in truth, anchored in purpose. Her voice didn't need to rise to be heard. It resonated because it was real. The screen softened to slow-motion images, people watching her clip on phones, sharing it, smiling. A teacher pausing a lesson to play the moment for her students. A mother whispering, "See? That's what strength looks like." The narrator's voice deepened, almost reverent. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person told they don't belong, every accent mocked, every credential questioned, every door closed to those who built their own keys. The music swelled, strings lifting the moment from the personal to the universal. Crockett's calm wasn't submission, it was mastery, the kind that comes from surviving long enough to no longer need anyone's permission to stand tall. A montage of words filled the screen: dignity, resilience, purpose. Because the truth is, the narrator said, that dignity doesn't beg to be recognized, it commands it. And when it's displayed, even those who deny it can't look away. The camera panned back to the hearing room, now empty, chairs pushed in, lights dimmed, a symbol of the aftermath. But in that emptiness, her voice still echoed. She turned mockery into meaning, and in doing so, she reminded millions that worth isn't given, it's proven. The tone shifted slightly, softer, almost intimate. So the next time someone tries to measure you by their standard, remember, the loudest noise fades, but grace lingers. Images of diverse faces filled the screen: students, activists, mothers, workers, all reflecting a single thread of pride. The line from Crockett's statement reappeared in text: "Mockery only stings when you doubt yourself. I don't." The narrator's final words carried a pulse of resolve, because one woman's calm can spark 1,000 voices, and those voices, steady, fearless, unshakable, can move a nation. The music slowed, the screen faded to black, leaving only the faint sound of applause, distant, echoing, eternal.
Pam Bondi mocked her law degree, but Jasmine Crockett's words made history. In that chamber, arrogance tried to drown out dignity and lost. Because truth doesn't need volume, it needs courage. If you believe arrogance should never win over dignity, this is your channel. This is where integrity still matters. Where we don't just watch moments like this, we stand with them. Like, share, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but for the movement. Because every click, every comment, every voice added here is a message that grace still has a place in power.